On today's episode, Jason Robertson and Mason Marchment both could be big helps for the Blackhawks. I'll discuss the likelihood of getting a trade done with the Stars.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jag Bushman. You can check me out on X at JagBushman2, but make sure to go and follow my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Hope everyone out there had themselves a wonderful weekend. Opening things up on the show here today, since getting knocked out of the Stanley Cup playoffs to the hands of the Edmonton Oilers in the Western Conference Final, things have been kind of messy for the Dallas Stars. Of course, Pete DeBoer, after surprisingly electing to pull Jake Ottinger, their franchise goaltender, in a do-or-die game after giving up a couple of early goals, he winds up getting canned. And there have also been some rumors around the Stars potentially moving either Jason Robertson or Mason Marchment because they're in a little bit of a salary cap crunch and have a slew of pending unrestricted and restricted free agents that they got to take care of before July 1st. And David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period recently has reported that Stars general manager Jim Neal is taking calls on both Robertson and Marchment at this time. And with that being the case, definitely got to talk about why the Blackhawks and general manager Kyle Davidson should be giving old Jim Neal a call, seeing what the asking price is for both of these two players. I will say, though, there have been some reports ever since that first announcement from David Pagnotta calling this a little bit overblown, and it sounds like the Stars would prefer not to move Jason Robertson in particular. But again, because of their salary cap crunch, I also just think as a whole, the Stars organization kind of got to ask themselves where they're at right now, right? They've obviously had a lot of good Stanley Cup runs, but they haven't been able to get over that hump and have a lot of players that they got to make decisions upon here over the next couple of weeks. So it just does feel like something has to give. I don't know if necessarily that's going to be Robertson in particular, but someone on the Dallas Stars feels like they're susceptible to a trade here within the next couple of weeks. And Robertson and Marchment, like I said right off the jump, both I think would be huge and welcomed additions to the Chicago Blackhawks forward group. First, starting with Jason Robertson, obviously the more talented and skilled player of the two. He's entering the final year of his current deal right now with a $7.75 million AAV, and he'll actually still be a restricted free agent with arbitration rights once that deal expires. He's set to turn 26 here later on this summer. Former 39th overall pick back in 2017. 6'3", 207 pounds. Great size and skill combination. Again, as I've been outlining on the show for a long, long time, that's really something the Blackhawks have been missing for a while. And we've seen Robertson really blossom into one of the better, if not the best offensive players for the Dallas Stars the last couple of seasons. He's had 79 points in each of the last 4 years, 80 on the dot in each of the last two, 41 goal scorer in the 2021-22 campaign, and then responded with a career best 46 in 2022-2023, along with 63 assists for a career best 109 points. Also has been a relatively solid postseason producer, 18 points in 19 games during the 2023 playoffs. Then he had 16 points in 19 games during the 2024 postseason, all while being 25 years old or younger. Didn't have his best stuff here during the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs, but of course was dealing with an injury. Only had 6 points, 4 goals, and 2 assists in 11 games. But in that series against the Edmonton Oilers, he at least finished on a high note with 4 goals, all 4 of the goals that he scored in the postseason occurring in the final 3 games of that Western Conference series. But still, the production after having that 109-point season in 2022-2023, he's only had 80 points each of the last 2 years, been just under a point per game margin. And again, even though he was injured, the postseason wasn't all that great. So I I mean, I wouldn't be wanting to trade Jason Robertson if I was the Dallas Stars or a Dallas Star fan. But again, you do got to ask yourself, if you are the Stars, you're going to have to make some tough decisions here this offseason. Whether the Hawks should have interest in Jason Robertson, I mean, absolutely. Duh. No brainer. Kyle Davidson already should have been on the phone with Jim Nill. He's got good size. He's got great skill. He's a good enough skater to get the job done. He would obviously be a huge boost to Connor Bedard there on the Blackhawks top line. We've needed more skill on the wing for a long time in general, and Jason Robertson comes with some good size. He also would help the Blackhawks reach the salary cap floor. I don't think it would be like ridiculous to go and give him around $11 million per year, as he's kind of expected to get at this point in time, given what he's done in his first 4 to 5 full NHL seasons. And also, again, like I mentioned, he'd still be under team control, although with arbitration rights when his upcoming deal comes to a close. So yeah, the Blackhawks should definitely have interest in Jason Robertson. The problem here is, A, it sounds like they'd prefer not to move Robertson. I don't really know how serious they are in taking these calls. And B, obviously, this would be to an interdivision team in the Chicago Blackhawks. I'm sure they would hate to trade away Robertson to Chicago just to have to go against him every single season for a long, long time, right? So that definitely makes things a little bit more complicated for the Blackhawks. They would absolutely have to pay a premium. And I also do think there would be some tough discussions as far as working a deal out to get Jason Robertson for the Blackhawks. I just don't know. I'd assume the Stars would want something in return that can go and help them right here, right now. And I just don't know who that would be from the Blackhawks outside of like Alex Vlasic and Frank Nazar, who are two guys we're really not wanting to trade at this point in time. Maybe it could be a package deal of like a first round pick, maybe Kevin Korchinski or like an Artem Levshinov type of player. But again, I don't think the Blackhawks would want to get rid of Artem Levshinov and Kevin Korchinski on his own, even with the first round pick. If the Stars are still trying to get something to help them win right now, yeah, it would alleviate some cap space for them and solve that problem. But they still have that Jason Robertson sized hole in their top six. And if they're still wanting to be competitive, you get what I'm saying? That wouldn't necessarily be the smartest move. So while I would love to see the Blackhawks go and get Jason Robertson, while I'm sure Kyle Davidson has already called up Jim Nill, I just think the likelihood of getting Jason Robertson is very, very slim for a multitude of different reasons. However, Mason Marchment, Blackhawks fans, while he obviously doesn't move the needle like Jason Robertson, I do think Mason Marchment is an attainable player for the Blackhawks here this offseason. He also, like Robertson, is entering the final year of his deal. He has a $4.5 million AAV, and then he's going to be an unrestricted free agent next summer. Turns 30 here in actually just a couple of days, but another guy with good size, not the skill of Jason Robertson, but a decent skill game, right? 6'5", 212-pound power forward would be a nice boost to the Blackhawks middle six to just make them a little bit more sturdy and harder to play against. And Marchment is a decent point producer. Like I said, 47 points, 22 goals, and 25 assists in just 62 games this past season. Also had a career best 53 points the year prior, 22 goals and 31 assists. So back-to-back 20-goal campaigns. Did it this year in just 62 games, right? So if he played all 82 and was healthy, probably would have potted 30 for the first time in the NHL. He hasn't ever been the most consistent, playoff producer, but I don't even know if that's what the Blackhawks would be bringing him in for. Again, he's 30 years old. He's on an expiring deal, but he is someone that, again, would bring size and skill to the Blackhawks middle six. It would help them reach the salary cap floor this year with his $4.5 million AAV. And also, worst case Ontario, it doesn't go very well. Oh no, Mason Marchment's on an expiring deal. You could always try and trade him at the deadline here this summer. So I think Mason Marchment makes a lot of sense for the Blackhawks. And while I think the Stars would be reluctant to trade a player like Jason Robertson in the division, I don't think they'd have that same feeling about Mason Marchment because he just isn't the same type of player as Jason Robertson, right? And again, it would be on an expiring deal. Odds of the Blackhawks signing him long-term, if they acquire him, it's possible, but I would say it's relatively slim. But Mason Marchment would check a lot of boxes in the short term for the Blackhawks. And again, I don't think it would be that hard pressed for the Stars to go and trade him in the division. So I love to see the Blackhawks call in up the Dallas Stars about both of these guys and their availability over the next couple of weeks. Jason Robertson, I'd love to have him along with Connor Bedard moving forward, but that seems hard-pressed. Easier said than done. Mason Marchment, I think, is a legitimate trade candidate for the Blackhawks here this summer. $4.5 million off of the books for the Stars. I know it's not the biggest number in the world, but would be trending them in the right direction in terms of a little bit of cap relief. So there are my thoughts on Mason Marchment and Jason Robertson reportedly being on the trade block, according to David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period. Let me know in the comment section below, Blackhawks fans, your thoughts about both Robertson and Marchment. Coming up in just a moment, though, make sure to stick with me as I'll dive into Brady Martin's 2025 NHL draft profile. Real quick, though, I do got to talk to you all first about Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's real easy to lose track these days. But that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you complete visibility and full control over your finances. And Monarch isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center so that you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So you can stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. And what I personally love about Monarch is that instead of juggling multiple financial apps at the same point in time, you can just use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term goals. So go and take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money by using our code LOCKDOWNNHL in all caps at monarchmoney.com, and you'll get 50% off on your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKDOWNNHL in all caps for half off on your first year. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2, it's time to get into another 2025 NHL draft profile as we continue to close in on the big day. As a brief reminder, though, I've already covered prospects like Matthew Schaefer, Michael Misa, Caleb Denoye, Anton Frondel, James Higgins, and most recently, Porter Martone. Make sure to go and check out those episodes for the full scoop on each one of those prospects, and be on the lookout for my 2025 NHL draft rankings, which are set to drop next week before the NHL draft begins. Today, though, the next NHL draft profile that I want to get into is 18-year-old center Brady Martin, whose stock seems to be rising at the moment. And it feels like every single year in the couple of weeks leading up to the NHL draft, you always hear about that one prospect who everyone loved at the combine, whose, stock seems to be all of a sudden skyrocketing out of nowhere. Last year, we saw that happen with Jet Luchenko. Also saw it happen with Beckett Seneca late. This year, it seems to be happening with Brady Martin, who's actually, according to FanDuel, the favorite now to go 4th overall to the Utah Mammoth, which is very interesting to me. And while it's unlikely the Blackhawks at number 3 would be considering Brady Martin, still a player that I do want to get into because you never know what could happen, especially with a report coming out just about an hour before I hit record on today's show, something I'll be discussing probably on the pod tomorrow, at the very least Wednesday. The number 3 pick could be in play for the Blackhawks. They could be open to trading back. And if that is the case, who knows how far they trade back to? Maybe they get into a range where someone like Brady Martin is the top available prospect, or someone like Jake O'Brien, Roger McQueen, or Victor Eklund. So those are guys I still want to cover here over the next couple of days before next week I really start honing in on the latter half of the first round for the Blackhawks. Projected 2nd pick in the first round. But getting into Brady Martin here today, 6 foot, 187-pound center. As I mentioned, already 18 years old, turned 18 back in March. So on the younger side for the 2025 draft class. But Martin tallied 72 points, 33 goals and 39 assists in 57 games as the alternate captain for the Sioux Greyhounds of the OHL this past season. He saw a nice leap in his production from his first year in the O, where he had just 28 points, 10 goals, and 18 assists in 52 games worth of action. Also this year saw him have a really nice performance for Team Canada at the U18 World Juniors to help them win a gold medal, where he was also an alternate captain. He had 11 points, 3 goals, and 8 assists in 7 games. Getting into the rankings for Brady Martin, according to the top scouts and analysts in the industry. And one thing I mentioned about these rankings when I first started my 2025 draft profiles with Matthew Schaefer and Michael Misa, these are rankings according to elite prospects. So a lot of these came right about at the beginning of the summer. So for a guy like Brady Martin, who's had his stock rise over the last couple of weeks, that doesn't get accurately depicted in these rankings. But I do still think in general, it's interesting to go over them because narratives and things can change so funny in the couple of weeks leading up to the draft. I think it's just interesting to go and look at these rankings before how everyone has them sorted out in their final mock drafts right before June 27th. But for Brady Martin, the rankings, elite prospects has him at number 12. Bob McKenzie has him at 13. Craig Button, the highest on Brady Martin of the group, has him ranked 6th. Tony Ferrari, the lowest on him of the group, has him ranked all the way down at 22nd. McKean's Hockey has him ranked 10th. Daily Faceoff has him inside the top 10 at number 7. Dobber Prospects has Martin ranked 17th. And then the Hockey News has him ranked 16th. So very split opinions here on Brady Martin, depending on who you're asking. But again, most of couple of these rankings at the very least came a couple of months ago, but expected to go between 10 to 15 to a lot of these folks, but doesn't seem like that's going to be the case any longer, as it seems pretty wild that Martin would make it outside of the top 8. But diving into his skill set, his strengths and his weaknesses, when watching the tape, his highlights, some of the draft profiles that I like to go and watch on YouTube and whatnot, the number one thing that stood out to me about Martin, I guess there were 2 things that really stood out to me. The first one, as far as his offensive traits, has a really strong shot. One of the most powerful shots in this draft class for sure. I've seen numerous scouts say that it's already at an NHL level, and to me, it's probably going to be his best offensive attribute in the NHL. He's able to beat goaltenders clean, one-on-one, really good power, pinpoint accuracy, both glove high and to the blocker side, which I really like to see. I like to see that diverse kind of shot selection and having that full arsenal, not just picking the same point or like rifling the puck, spamming it glove high every single time you get an opportunity. No, Brady Martin is a diverse goal scorer, great power and great accuracy. Maybe not the best mechanics. I don't think he's at Anton Frondel's level, and I don't think he's the complete goal scorer that Porter Martone is, in terms of like Martone can score from the outside, he can score from in front of the net, he can score on redirects, right? But I do think Martin has probably the better power and will likely be the better perimeter goal scorer in the NHL, in my opinion, than Porter Martone. But I think Martone is probably the more well-rounded goal scorer and just the different ways that he can score goals. But definitely Brady Martin is right up there with Frondel and Martone as the best goal scorers in this entire class. He's going to be a solid 25-plus goal scorer, 20 to 25-plus goal scorer in the NHL. The other thing that stands out to me is for a kid who's only 6 foot and I know 187 pounds at that size is somewhat notable, but man, is this kid physical, and he plays just a much more physical game than you would expect from someone of that frame. Always finishing his checks, not scared to go and mix it up with bigger players, and had some like highlight reel type of hits, a couple of them for Team Canada at the World Juniors, where he just absolutely laid guys out. He's not scared to go after bigger guys, and he's just always engaged. And I think that's what coaches, scouts, and analysts really love about Brady Martin is he's engaged in all facets of the game and is super physical and just plays a style that coaches absolutely love. He also pairs that with just an overall dog level compete. He's not similar to Frank Nazar in like any other area of his game, but the way he is driven out there and the energy that he provides in all three zones, it reminds me of Frank Nazar and just the way that he's a pain in the butt, a thorn in your side to play against. That's definitely one of the biggest strengths of Brady Martin. Has a 200-foot game. Clearly that he's respected in the room and by his peers as well, given that he's worn a letter for the Sioux Greyhounds, worn a letter for Team Canada, and was one of the biggest do-it-all type of players in the OHL this year for a team that wasn't very good in the Sioux Greyhounds. Then he has some pretty good hockey IQ. I think that's how a lot of his non-goal scoring production happens in the offensive zone. Makes nice passes, but his offensive IQ and the way he sees the game is generally how he gets it done, right? Sees streaking teammates cutting to the slot, sees guys backdoor and is able to get the pass through. Does make some nifty enough passes where I think he could be a power play. I don't know if he's going to be the main puck mover or the guy who's possessing the puck the most on the power play, but he's a gifted enough passer where I do think he can still be a top power play type of option. And then he's also just a really strong player, grinds it out hard in the corners. Again, always engaged in those one-on-one battles and is usually winning them when he's going up against his age group. Works really hard to maintain possession of the puck. Good in front of the net. Doesn't get bullied around easily whatsoever. Very strong and sturdy on his skates. And also can turn really fast. Works really well with his edge work because he's got that strong lower half of his body. But as far as the weaknesses go for Brady Martin, there's definitely a couple of them that are worth mentioning. Number one is he's not an elite skater, and he's kind of got some weird mechanics. His top level speed is fairly good, and I do think he's a capable enough skater to get it done in the NHL, but I don't think it's ever going to be the true strength of his game. I don't think he's ever going to be a primary puck carrier at the next level. Got a little bit of a hunch when he's skating out there, so not perfect mechanics, and that is definitely a concern, especially when we're talking about the Blackhawks here with Brady Martin maybe at number 3 or still even high in the first round. That's a little bit of a concern. And then I also just don't know if he has that one elite trait. His goal scoring it's good. He's one of the best shooters in the class, but altogether, this is a pretty weak draft class, and he's not Anton Frondel, and I don't think he has the well-rounded nature because he's just not as big as Porter Martone, where he's not as privy to finish and find loose pucks and score rebound goals or get redirects in front. Porter Martone is more built for that style of play in the NHL. Because Brady Martin has that compete level and that dog in him, he'll still go to the front of the net, but Porter Martone is just the bigger player between the two. And then outside of that, for Martin, he's got decent hands, but they're not elite. He's got good vision, but it's not elite. He's got good hockey IQ, but it's not elite. So is the work ethic and the dog enough to draft him this high? That's kind of the question to me about Brady Martin. As far as my NHL player comp and what I think his upside is going to be in the NHL, I think he's likely a 50 to 55 point guy who works really hard, is reliable, is loved by his teammates and by the coaching staff, plays a game that you can trust. But I don't know if this guy's going to be a top line center in the NHL. Seems more like a second line center that you like to have behind a really savvy offensive guy. And for the Blackhawks, that would make sense. But number 3, in my opinion, is just far too early. As far as the comparison, I've seen Sam Bennett. I've seen Brad Marchand. I've seen JT Miller. I think Elias Lindholm is kind of a fair comparison. Lindholm is a little bit bigger than Brady Martin, but again, just a guy who can help you out in all facets of the game, will be reliable defensively, but probably doesn't have the upside offensively to be a true number 1 center in this league. Lindholm, he had a 40-goal season and has produced 70 points in this league. I wouldn't be surprised to see Brady Martin have those types of years, but consistently, I don't think that's the level he's going to be producing at in the NHL. So for the Blackhawks at number 3, I don't think he's part of this conversation. It's far too early, in my opinion. But again, if they happen to trade back, maybe somewhere between 7 and 9, that's where I'd be interested for Brady Martin. Let me know your thoughts on Martin down below in the comment section, Blackhawks fans. But that's going to take care of his 2025 NHL draft profile. Coming up here in just a moment before I close out today's episode, still want to get into some of the latest updates that we got on pending unrestricted free agent. Ryan Donato. Real quick, just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the new Locked On NHL Game Night, one of the best podcasts right now on the Locked On Podcast Network. Every game, every night, right up until a champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale with Locked On NHL Game Night, which you can find on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, we are, of course, not only quickly approaching the NHL draft, but also that July 1st free agency date. And the Blackhawks still have not worked out a deal with pending unrestricted free agent Ryan Donato, who posted career highs all across the board this year and was one of, if not the biggest bright spot on the entire team. We haven't really heard much about contract negotiations between the two sides since the season came to an end, but just over a week ago, Scott Powers of The Athletic gave us a little bit of a heads up or a look inside at what's been going on. He did report that the Hawks and Donato have been discussing a potential new contract since the season's ended, and they're still hopeful that they can get a deal done with Donato to stay in Chicago before July 1st. I'm a little concerned given that it hasn't happened at this point in time, but as I've mentioned when discussing this topic on the show previously, if I was Ryan Donato, I'd be pretty patient. I'd be probably looking to hit the open market, just given that teams across the NHL, right, with the salary cap going up, I don't think people are going to be, massively overspending, but there is, I think, going to be an uptick in terms of teams that could actually be aggressive in the free agent market, aka there could be more options for someone like Ryan Donato should he not re-sign here with Chicago. So not all that surprising to me that the two sides have not been able to finalize a deal at this point in time. But with July 1st just a couple of weeks away, we have seen a couple of deals get signed in the NHL with a pair of centers that could give us a little bit of insight at what Donato could be getting in his next contract, with those players being Brock Nelson for the Colorado Avalanche, Yanni Gourde for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't really think will give us much info as to what we could be looking at here for Ryan Donato, but definitely wanted to discuss the Brock Nelson signing. 33 years old is Brock Nelson at this stage of his career, acquired by the Avalanche at this year's trade deadline, has officially signed a 3-year extension with them with a $7.5 million AAV. And looking at Nelson's production the last few years, had 56 points total combined for the Islanders and the Avalanche this year, 26 goals and 30 assists in 80 games. And he's also tallied at least 69 points now in each of the last 3 seasons, while also being one of the best two-way centers in the entire game. So $7.5 million, that's what Brock signed for in Colorado. Don't think Ryan Donato is going to be getting that kind of number, even though he had 31 goals and 31 assists this year, a career best 62 points. I think the NHL and the rest of the teams here are pretty savvy, knowing that Donato's previous career best in points is 31. So the likelihood of him putting up 62 points in another 30-goal campaign, it's hard-pressed. It can happen, but it's hard-pressed. And because of that, Donato is not going to be getting $7.5 million out there on the market. Yanni Gourde signed a 6-year deal at $2.3 million per year with the Tampa Bay Lightning, where it all started for him. Don't really think that deal's all that comparable to Ryan Donato, but for what it's worth, those are the first 2 centers that have signed here in the summer. Donato apparently has been sitting on, or before the regular season came to a close, was reportedly sitting on a 3-year deal with a $4 million AAV. Knowing what Brock Nelson signed for, knowing salary caps going up in the NHL, again, if I was Ryan Donato, $4 million per year, well, given the likelihood of him repeating the numbers that he put up this last year, it might be smart for him to sign a 3-year deal at $4 million. But I still feel like that's a little bit of a low ball there from the Blackhawks, right? Like, I feel like someone on the market would be willing to give Donato $5 million for 3 years. If I was the Blackhawks, I wouldn't really be all that worried about the AAV. A 3-year deal makes you think about it a little bit more, and that's always kind of been my concern. How I'd handle this Ryan Donato situation, I know he wants probably some security here in his next deal, but I'd offer him 2 at like $6 million. Give him a decent increase, but with less term. I know that's probably not the way that he wants to go about it, but I would be more interested in doing that as a Blackhawks fan than giving him a third year at $5 million. I'd rather give him 2 for 6. That's the way I personally feel about it. I don't know if Donato would want to go about it that way, but 3 years at $4 million, I don't think that's going to get it done. I wonder if Donato is considering signing with Chicago still at this point, or if he's wanting to test the open market. And if he does test the open market, that doesn't mean that he's not coming back here in Chicago, but the likelihood that he returns obviously only goes down and down and down. It'll be interesting to see if the Blackhawks wind up getting something done with Donato. They certainly have the money to go and do it. And if they're not going to be in the Mitch Marner sweepstakes, they got to be spending some money to get to the salary cap floor. So that's why I wouldn't be afraid to throw Ryan Donato like $6 or $6.5 million if he takes a 2-year deal. And still, if he thinks he can go and have this type of production again in the NHL, he'll be a free agent again in just a couple of years and can still go and capitalize on that while only being 31 years old. So there are some of the latest updates that we got on the Ryan Donato situation as we continue to creep towards the July 1st free agency date. That's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, though. Thank you again to everyone for joining me on today's show. Make sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already, and to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. That way, you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jag Bushman. You can find me on X at JagBushman2, but make sure to follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Till the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Mondays. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.